We are officially recording, just so you know.
So we have to shape up, right?
Shape up.
So Linda is our host.
Well, I think
Yeah, so
Linda's got,
I will go ahead and share the screen. And for general government, it's probably easier if we just go capital budget and operating. Capital budget is really simple. We only have two capital requests. It's the IT, which is the annual, the WAN and the software updates. And we have parking department, which is part of general government, and they have a capital request for some equipment, and those are the only two capital requests. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I am now. Yeah. Okay,
Perfect.
that's easier. That's much easier.
Right, so I'm just gonna scroll towards the end here just to kind of get to that capital budget screen. So here we go.
I'm actually
for
going to
I-
sign out of my iPad and back into my computer. So let me back in when I,
okay.
okay.
Okay. So IT has the two annual capital projects, 75,000 for hardware and 60,000 for software. And it's the same amount moving forward, same amount this year as it is in fiscal year 22. Also in general government, we have, I guess, public access is, we consider that general government. This year, Channel 79, in addition to their operating budget request, they did put in a capital request for some of the audiovisual equipment that they use. They were able to secure a $4,500 grant out of their $23,000 request, and so there's $18,000 for miscellaneous audiovisual equipment. Their equipment is really old, and so this is a time when they're looking to replace that. So that was something that was included in their capital request for next year at $18,000.
And if I can just jump in on that one,
Sure.
maybe before any questions. So this is equipment that has been sort of cobbled together over the last few years. They're buying parts when they can find them, and it's been going down offline more than they like. And so they got a couple of quotes, and this seems to be the best avenue to move this forward.
Linda, I just like to say that I like seeing the number, and it's about time that we contribute more towards that channel.
Oh, great.
Right.
Christina, thank you. Remember, they do government and community, but this, we house it all here at Town Hall,
We
Yeah.
depend on them for everything.
especially now with COVID, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And then the only other general government capital request is the license plate readers for the parking department. And this went down. I believe their initial request was 19,000. They got an updated quote about 2 days ago or so. So we lowered it down. It went down 5,000. So it's at 13,600.
It might even be lower than that, Linda. I feel like it started at 14 and went down 5.
That's a wide range.
So let me tell you, first of all, what the reason why we need that is. Right now, each of the vehicles has a license plate reader that can only do certain lots. And because they're down a person, they've decided that it would make sense for each vehicle to have the ability to be able to use the readers in all of the lots. So it's a software upgrade, if you will, so that they have the ability to do that and they don't have to switch vehicles. I just want to check that number. I'm sure you're right, Linda, but I'll just double check.
Yeah, let me see. I have it here.
Yeah, it's a wide range. It's just,
Yeah, sorry. Actually, the good thing that happened was when the number first came in, it seemed high, and we asked
Oh,
Chris
that's good.
to look at it, and he was able to get them down 5,000.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so it went from 13,600 to 8,600.
Okay, good.
Right, so you're right. And those are the only capital requests we have for general government. Unless there are any questions, I can kind of go over the operating budget with you.
Looks good.
Okay. So on the operating budget, I'm just going to go over some revenues and then we'll go on to the expense side. So I'm going to share my screen here. So tax collections, again, that's based on, that number will change. We're estimating right now it's set at the 98.5% collection rate. With the current assessment, we just got some updated grand list numbers from SEBI that are part of this number. And therefore, given where the budget is, given the mill rate, given the grand list, it calculates to a tax revenues of 139 million. As far as parking permits, this is a number that's somewhat still in flux. As you recall, and Tucker, you could speak more to this, we did suspend the parking permits, the seasonal parking permits, the annual parking permits when COVID hit. We've started to open up some of that. We've opened up downtown parking and those meters. The passes, we're still not open, but once they do, we anticipate that revenue to start coming in. What Stacy has plugged in now is the assumption that by FY22 we will be back to normal. I think that's a big assumption. As far as commuting, one of the discussions that took place at the Board of Selectmen was, even if we do go back to commuting, people may not be commuting 5 days a week. And therefore, do we keep that same pricing model or do we adjust the pricing model to reflect a 2 to 3 day weekly commute versus a 5 day weekly commute? And so I think as we go through this process, by the time it gets to the Board of Finance, Town Council, these numbers may be revised, but for now, this is what we have in there. But although we're projecting a decrease from the current year, we're still fairly high at 1.1 million, which is something that we really do want to take another look at.
On the
when we
commuter
review
parking,
these revenues.
the thinking was that if somebody is going into New York 3 days a week versus 5, they will probably still maintain their permit, their annual permit, and want to get it.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going out charging until April 1 at the earliest. But the other revenue is we have started charging in the lots again, just for hourly parking. And Kevin did something that no other first selectman in my time has been able to accomplish, and then got all employees out of the town lots, out of the Park Street lot and the Playhouse lot. And we've been able to offer 20 more premium parking spots because those seem to be ones that everybody wants at $450 a pop, for the realtors and those folks to be able to come and just park and come and go and not have to worry about their hourly meter parking fine. So, but I think the commuter lots, again, we decided that people would probably still keep their annual permit even if they're not going in 5 days a week.
Where are the employees parking, Tucker?
We moved most of them over to Locust Lot, and then we moved some, we have an arrangement to be able to use the Red Cross lot and the Vine Cottage lot right now. So between all of those, we were able to get everybody off, which is huge. And we had 26 employees using the Park Street lot. Remember, this is also in conjunction with the fact that we've offered free parking to employees of businesses. There's a whole process where they have to get registered and that kind of thing. So we're really just trying to free up prime parking for prime customers.
Yeah, but Tucker, back up a second. We didn't do it. We actually did it because Park Street was so crowded, because we weren't policing, and therefore we wanted to open it up to people who were shopping and going to restaurants. Then we decided later to offer the free parking at both Locust and Center, but both Morse Court and Park Street were really, really crowded, and we had 26 town employees parking there. And then subsequently, it was decided to open those spots up, 20 more spots to the premium parking spaces. But
What I started to say was that you managed to get all of the town hall employees out of those lots as well, which is.
Well, it wasn't quite honestly, but anyway, let's go ahead.
We made it happen. It's done.
And the employees are perfectly they have free parking less than a half a block from the town hall. So it's kind of like, not a hardship.
Yep.
Yep.
Sorry, Linda.
Which, by the way,
Oh, no, not at all.
I think the move to free parking in Center Lot and Locust has been so far looking like a real smart idea, because finally we're freeing up the other lots for shoppers and restaurant goers.
And it's being very well received. We're getting a ton of applications, and they're coming in and saying how grateful they are. So again, getting them off of Main and Elm, most importantly.
Nick and I have been working on the opposite idea, make all the lots free, but we couldn't figure out how to control it so people would park where we wanted to park. So this seems to be a better idea.
Sounds good.
So we're currently working on a banking and investment RFP, just to kind of take advantage of seeing if we can get better returns on some of our investments. And therefore, right now, we had 1.1 million in investment income last year based on the funds that we have. The budget keeps it relatively flat at 1.1, but this is a number, again, that as we go through this RFP process, we'll get a better understanding of what the competitive rates are. And so this is also a value that could change as far as investment income. And we've been working with Bob on the Board of Finance and Andrew Brooks and others in the finance department to kind of see what's out there. We're hoping to have an RFP out by mid-February, and that will give us a better understanding of what the competitive rates are. So that number could potentially be adjusted as well as we move along. Yes.
The magnitude of that number is pretty small, right? I mean, it's pretty tight range, right? If I asked you your expectations that made you giddy, would you say that rates would be?
Close. I'd probably give it anywhere between maybe 8 on the low end. I don't know if it'll go much higher than 1.1 or 1.2, but we'll see because we're already. This is January. I don't know. You're projecting interest rate 18 months out. It's tough.
Yeah, I just want to have realistic expectations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We've talked about investment income, conveyance fees. We are seeing some positive trends. Still doing well year to date. We're at $1.3 million, whereas we had budgeted $1 million. It's difficult to forecast how long this trend will continue. For now, we have 1.1 million budgeted next year compared to 1 million this year, trending upwards. Slightly lower than what we anticipate to end this year. But again, it's trying to predict what's going to be happening. As we move along the budget process, by the time this gets back to the Board of Finance for final approval in April, we may have some provisions on the number based on the year-to-date numbers as well. We'll look at that. As far as some of the state grants, the excess cost grant, when the governor presented, I believe he's responding to the community small, what is it called? COST, the Small Towns Connecticut organization. He pledged at that point that even though the state is experiencing a budget deficit, he does not plan to make that up on the backs of municipal aid. And therefore, we've estimated municipal aid that we get from the state to remain flat at current levels. We'll see. There is, once he presents his budget here in a couple of weeks or so, we'll know for sure what those numbers are that are plugged into the budget. But for now, we're keeping them at current levels. We're not estimating them going down nor going up.
Neil, I had to mute you again. I'm sorry. We're getting a lot of clicks that come through. So if you want to talk, you'll have to just mute and unmute yourself if that's okay. Okay.
Building permits. In speaking to Brian, he's still not yet ready to kind of bump that up from the current year. So the current year budget is at $830,000. He's asked that we keep it at that number. Year to date, we're at 330. So, we're halfway through the year, but we're not halfway in terms of revenue. But again, this is a seasonal revenue. So it doesn't necessarily follow. It's not necessarily divided in 12 equal installments. So it's seasonal. We may see an uptick in April and early summer with the construction season, and we may make that 830 budget this year. But for now, he said to just kind of keep it flat at the current year. So that's what we've done. And then ECS is also another state grant that we've kept flat. And those are really the primary revenue drivers on the general government side. And I'd like to kind of walk into the expenditure side of the equation, unless there are questions on revenues. Okay, so I'm going to move right along. And first is the First Selectman's Office, and let me do this. First Selectman's Office, overall total budget is showing a 4.5% year-over-year decrease. That is driven by personnel and staffing changes with Tom Stagler leaving and Tucker taking on. There is a salary differential that's driving that wage line down in terms of FTE salaries. The other drivers on here, small decrease, longevity. Tom, because of his tenure, got longevity pay, so that goes away for the most part. It's a relatively small budget, and therefore small changes provide a huge variance percentage-wise, but it's 4.4% delta downwards year over year.
I have a question. It's
Sure.
Penny. I guess the Board of Finance is going to be analyzing for selectmen or selectmen salaries, right? We've done that periodically over the years, and when you do that study, you have to be really very careful about analyzing the job descriptions of the various first selectmen, because they all have different responsibilities, some more, some less. And like in Darien, I think they have a general manager or kind of relationship. So a number of the responsibilities that Kevin, has on his plate aren't shared by other first selectmen. So you've really got to be apples and apples and oranges when you do that evaluation. So that's one point. Secondly, is you also have to look at other towns, whether or not they compensate their selectmen. Not all do. And so you have to, again, look at their responsibilities and what is achieved by compensating the selectman level in our governance.
Yeah, Penny, Cheryl Jones is doing that research for the Board of Finance, and then it'll come to you.
Good.
As you know, in Darien, the town manager makes $185,000 a year, and the town first selectman makes $135,000.
Right. Well, I was just letting everybody else know that has been part of the analysis over the years, and as to why there is such a spread, in compensation of the first selectman, because it is the differences in responsibilities.
The next general government is finance. Finance is, the delta is 3.6% increase. This year, just to talk about what the drivers are, is we have 3 unions that are whose collective bargaining ends June 30th, and so they begin July 1. So for departments whose staff are among the expired unions, those increases are not in the respective budget, but they're set aside in contingency, which is what we've done historically. For departments that have staff that are within the town hall union that has an active contract, we have put those increases within the budget. And therefore, finance has, I believe, 3 town hall union employees, and therefore those salary increases are included in the budget, whereas Some other departments may not. Public Works is a good example where the entire salary increases are set aside. So is police, so is fire, because those unions have not been ratified. So those are among the drivers of the salary increases on the town side. We do have a, let's see, part-time. Part-time, we do have a part-time increase in part-time. Currently, we have one who's the town treasurer, but moving into FY22, we do have a part-time employee in town, Bob Mantilia, whose salaries is being split amongst various departments, and therefore some of it is paid out of the First Selectmen, some of it is paid out of finance, and some of it is paid out of Public Works Engineering, and some of it is paid out in the elections office. And therefore, among the drivers of the increase in finance is budgeting for that position. We've always had this position, we just haven't budgeted for it. We've kind of been paying it with savings internally. And so this year we made a decision to just budget, so we do have a full accounting of part-time employees, and that's what's driving that. Those are among the drivers of that increase.
Linda,
Yes.
I don't think it's correct to say we've always had that position.
Well, not always, but this fiscal year, we've had that position. Let me rephrase.
Linda, what is the responsibility of that position?
Special
They
projects.
work on, go ahead, Kevin.
Projects, you know, when we did the sewer fee, you know, we have intense, we did the transfer station fee changeover. That requires intensive work over a few months to make the process electronic and to do the database work. So Bob started out as he had been working part-time for the registrar's office, and then he started working on the sewer fee. Then he worked on the transfer station fee. He's working on the health department's testing. So you know, it's useful to have someone who can do database management. And he's a part-time person. He's not full-time, and he's also not he's not a full-time employee. So his tenure could be ended at any time. So.
Okay, thank you.
Linda, where does it
Yes.
reflect? Can you hear me? Is this on? I mean, you've kept us on, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, all right. Where does it reflected here, the number of part-time people who have been terminated during COVID? I know Bob is still there. There's a couple others, but where is the change from the previous pre-COVID numbers here?
I don't think there's that many. I mean, there was one parking person who was full
Yeah,
time.
there was, yeah. Cheryl, we've gone through them. Where is,
Yeah, Judy, basically we've moved staff around. We have not let people go. In regards to, if we think about LAPM, those workers, many of them just weren't doing programs. They ended up
Right.
going unemployment, but we have not terminated people. Like Kevin said, we moved one of our parking people over to Public Works. We moved another parking person to help more in the recreation department. So Kevin has worked closely with me so that we aren't trying to terminate, but trying to reallocate them into other positions that we need.
so they are reflected in the salaries of the departments that they are currently working for?
Correct, yes.
Correct.
But there was still a decrease.
Well, I mean,
Public Works, certainly Mike is not coming in. Who else? There was a few.
yes, but that wasn't because of COVID.
No, but it still is a decrease in a part-time
Correct.
person.
Correct. And you'll definitely see a decrease in part-time for the after-school workers.
Right.
We'll see a decrease over at LAPM. We will see a decrease over the past summer with our summer workers. So you will definitely see that within the budgets as Linda goes through that.
Now, assuming we get back by 2022, do we have money enough to bring these people back, especially at Lapham, which it would be an ideal example?
Yes, money.
Somewhere, I mean, there's
Yeah.
somewhere there they can be rotated back.
Yes.
All right.
The next general government department is the tax assessor's office. And the tax assessor, again, is primarily driven by staffing. All of the personnel, with the exception of SEBI, our town hall union, and therefore those salaries are reflected in the salary line. Most of those lines are, if you look at the percentages, they're relatively flat to zero, but the big chunk of that increase is driven by those salaries. And the same is true for the tax assessor. The tax assessor is one where, because they also are responsible for sewer, they've always been responsible when sewer was a tax, and now that sewer is a bill. We split those salaries 80-20. So 80% of the salary, Social Security, 401, overtime is split between the sewer fund and the general fund. And so the salaries that are reflected here only reflect, the salaries that are reflected here only reflect 80%. And the balance 20% of those salaries is in the sewer fund. That's how we kind of do that cost allocation. But even with that, you do see a decrease of year over year of about 0.8%. The legal budget is in the general fund. We've kept that flat at 300, which is what we had budgeted this year. We typically budget 300 level amount, and then as we incur those expenses, you'll see we allocate those expenses across the respective departments. So if he's working on tax appeals, whatever they invoice, we will bill it towards the assessor's tab within the legal budget, and that's how we track expenses. And even though this year we're going into salary negotiations, we may anticipate some additional expenses in legal fees just for going through the collective bargaining process. Cheryl is confident that the budget that we have here is sufficient. We also have a $300,000 contingency should we need to increase, but we're fairly comfortable with keeping this line at $300,000 going into next year. HR, oh, Cheryl is here.
Oh, great.
I'll let you speak to HR. You're coming in at 1%.
1%. I think you can see from the budget, the increases are from Social Security and 401. We have left our budget relatively flat. The outside payroll processing is our big number. That is with ADP. We do have a 3-year contract with them, but this year, because of the election, it did go up because of the amount of poll workers we brought in. We do get charged extra for that. So we are hoping we'll be pretty steady with that next year.
Thank you. IT, again, is relatively flat. We looked at their capital budget. Their salaries are going up 1.6%. This year, there was one personnel adjustment. Cheryl did a salary review on, I believe it was Sal.
Correct.
And so there was I think a $3,000 or $4,000 adjustment to that salary just in reclassifying the work that they do. So that's reflected in the request. And all the other line items, and that corresponds with the increase in Social Security. They kept most of their other lines flat year over year. So in total, they're coming in at 1.7%. Town clerk is 467. And again, town clerk has town hall union employees, and therefore that accounts for the increase in salaries. All in all, they're coming in at 6.5% increase year over year. Register of voters is actually going down next year to 6.4%. They obviously, because of the elections that we had this year and the additional resources that were needed during COVID, they had higher expenses, and we transferred some additional funds this year. Election personnel was higher this year compared to prior years. So in FY22, they're going back to a more normal budget year, and therefore that line, elections personnel, is back to 17.5, whereas this year, they were at 32,000, and therefore that is the main driver of that. Of the decrease. The town council did revise the salaries for the register of voters, and so this does include their new salaries. Sure, we went from 22 to 26, right? 22,000 to 26 for each.
Correct.
And so those adjustments are included in that line.
Okay,
And
one
then
minute,
line use.
it's Penny. I was on mute. I'm sorry, when you were doing town clerk.
Sorry.
This is election year for the town clerk's position, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then the town council has to set that salary as well as the treasurer's salary.
Yes, and I did give John Engel a call to alert him to that, so he is aware of that.
Okay, good, great, thanks.
Who set the selectman's salary?
Board of Finance.
Okay.
No, actually, that's not correct. That's not correct, Judy. The Board of Finance is going to review it like they have in the past and make a recommendation to the town council, but the town council approves.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you're right. No, they can definitely reject it. Yeah. Or decrease it. Yeah.
But we can't increase, correct?
Right.
So,
Right. The recommendation comes from the Board of Finance.
so if we have a feeling, a sensibility to it, then we've got to get to you before you make your number.
Well, that would be helpful.
I was just underscoring that. to
Yes,
everybody on the
I hear
council.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Land use budget is going up 1%. We did talk about the revenue side of the equation. Tiger is on. Tiger, did you want to say anything as far as land use? I know that we have this year, there is the increase in, I think there's two. There's the one that's related to Connecticut General Statutes on affordable housing contract in there.
Yeah, they're both basically housing related. One's state statute 830J and the other one's an 830G. Both studies need to be done because they're one's a new study and one's kind of an ongoing study whereby they have to do it every several years. So that's why you'll see that increase in the professional services line.
Right. Thank you. And I guess we call health department general government. Health department is going up 9% for a couple of reasons. One, we did add a sanitarian position this year, so that is an increase. And we also added, that's the only one, right, Cheryl? It was just a sanitarian this year, correct?
And some part-time help. And
And
then
some
you-
part-time.
if you want to talk about Dr. Reed and the grant.
Right. And then this year, you'll see that on the personnel charts, Jen was able to get some additional grant funding. And therefore, a portion of Dr. Reed's salary and a portion of the public health nurse, actually public health nurse entirely, and a portion of Dr. Reed's salary are paid out of a grant, which is not part of the general fund budget, but they do have a grant that now pays for some of their staffing. Conservation Commission.
Where's the nurse? I'm sorry, but where's the nurse on here?
So the nurse, if you go to, and I'm going to make you dizzy here, below, I have some personnel sheets for each department. And let me see if I can get to the, oh, here it is.
I went through all of this yesterday, but I don't recall a decrease in those.
No, so it's not a decrease. So here's,
Where's
right
the
now,
offset?
I'm sharing, yes. So the offset, so the nurse is an added position, so it doesn't go away. So we basically added the position paid out of a grant. So we have about $41,000 of staff that are paid out of a grant. It doesn't take away from the general fund. It just doesn't add to it because we got a grant that funded that position.
Oh,
Did I
all
answer your
right. So
question, Judy?
the salaries that are in the wages, the full-time, are the towns or they are their full-time salaries?
Correct.
Correct. No,
Okay.
they're the town portion of the salary.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. and we were on land use. And then the other one that we have within general government is our insurance fund. And, you know, we get these numbers we have, and Cheryl, you can help here. We have our health advisor, Larry, who works with us to determine and looking at our claims experience and whatnot, and provides us information as to what those funds should be. We transfer all of our salary, our health expenses in our health internal service fund, but the town contribution portion of that, obviously, because it comes out of the general fund, you'll see that we have $6.2 million for that. This year, it's actually going down from what we did in the revised budget of 6.3. That's partly based on claims experience. And then the other elements are the 401A contributions. We still do 401A contributions for Board of Ed employees. And then we have a small portion for the unemployment and our wellness program. So all in all, those health benefits are going down 2% in terms of funding for those expenses. The discussion that's going to take place with the Board of Finance, and this discussion began yesterday with the Board of Ed Resource Committee, is the consideration of having one internal service fund,
Right.
To provide some efficiencies and just to kind of monitor, to balance out the annual fluctuations over that. Cheryl is looking at polling some other CCM entities in seeing how many of them have one versus two internal service funds. The entities that I've spoken with, all of them have one internal service fund for both. They do segregate the reserve amounts within the fund, which similar to what we do in the general fund. You know, we have a fund balance and we say this amount is for X, this amount is for Y. And so you would do similar things in a combined internal service fund. You would designate how much is for town, how much is for Board of Ed, or any additional pockets that we wish to do. That's how we did it when I was with the city of Norwalk. We had one fund for both, and within the funds, we had differentiated buckets. And each entity contributed into that bucket depending on what the actual calculations did. So that's going to be a discussion that the Board of Finance will have with the Board of Ed.
And Luca, I think it's important to note that we already share the stop loss with the Board of Ed and have been doing that very successfully for the past 2 years. So I think going into one internal service fund, we have that experience of working together.
Linda, back up if you would.
Sure.
It's a little, people need to understand something there back on the insurance contribution. The reason it's coming down is not because of experience necessarily, it's because of an accounting adjustment. Last year was higher than it should have been. It was an error that with respect to the library, and it wasn't Linda's fault because he didn't have the number for the budget year. But the reason, so it's a little misleading to see a minus 2% on health. It's not because we necessarily had greater experience. It's because of the comparison to the prior year, which is higher than it should have been. Is that correct, Linda?
It is somewhat, but our experience, if you look at what Larry has projected in terms of claims year over year, just the total claims, you know, he has it going on the town side to 3.8 million claims versus 4.2, 4.1 this year. So it is a function of both. So there is the adjustments for
I don't want people to get the misleading impression that, you know, because on the other hand, the Board of Education is up 14.5%. And
correct.
You know, to be down on health insurance is kind of unusual.
Can I ask a question? With regards to seniors that have passed the age of 65, are those being moved over to Medicare? And are we reducing our expenditures?
Christina,
are you talking about employees?
Yes.
Federal law requires if you're employed by an employer that provides health insurance, you have to be on the employer's plan. Like me, I had no choice. I have to be on the town's plan.
And there's no reduction or difference in terms of being 60 versus 65 in Medicare eligible?
Once you retire, there's a difference, but not while you're active.
Okay.
Yeah, we took, for example, Christina, we took the retirees we used to have them in the pool with the employees. We took them out, and they're now on a separate plan with what's called, was it AmWINS or something?
AmWINS.
Up in
Okay.
Hartford, so that they're getting a better deal, and the town's not, what we were doing really was penalizing the retirees by giving them a rate that the employees were paying. And they were actually subsidizing the active employees. So
Okay, thank you.
But Christina, you have an option. You don't have to do the same with your spouse. I mean, that's the good news. They can save money and the spouse can go on another insurance. It's the employee that is driven by the laws.
that's correct,
No.
because I actually initially put my wife on it.
And I told you, you're crazy.
Uh,
That was not.
Well,
Yeah,
actually,
it's more.
I put her back on her own, but then I brought her back because it's actually, there's reasons why to do that. So
Well, yeah, there are reasons, but money is not one of them.
well, I pay my premium. So.
Yeah, well, either way, but still, it's the AmWINS is actually, I will say, having had both of them, AmWINS is far superior to the one that we had. Oh, yeah.
Cheryl, do you want to talk about OPEB and our pension and OPEB? They're actually going down year over year to 1.8%.
Right, we are
And we
noticing,
recently had
go ahead.
go ahead.
For those of you from the Board of Finance, and I think some of the town council members were present when Hooker and Holcomb and Vanguard presented the evaluations, we are seeing an increase in the pension, but a decrease in the OPEB. So overall, with both of them, we are seeing a decrease of 1.8%.
The insurance liability, we typically don't get this final renewal number until usually it's April or May or just before we approve the budget. And so going in, we estimate about 3.5% increase, which is kind of what we've done historically and has been pretty close to what we historically, where we end up being. So we have the you'll see it's even 3.5% across the board. And that's just our estimate at this point, because we don't know what that number will be, but we will get an indication towards early mid-spring. The one thing with our insurer, Kerma, is because we're part of a risk pool, it varies year to year, but we also get rebates based on the pool's experience. And this rebates vary year to year, anywhere from 30,000. I believe one year we got almost a little over 100,000.
Correct.
And therefore, those are factored in as revenues, not necessarily as an offset to the expense here, but we do see a corresponding revenue depending on how the pool performs in any given year. And so this number is likely to change as we go through the budget process. And then we talked about the parking department. I believe this is the last general government department. You'll see that it goes down 8.4%, and this goes back to your point, Judy, at the beginning. We do have a reduction of one full-time position. The position left parking was initially in highways and now is within the fire department, and that position is not getting replaced. So there's just one person less compared to historical, and therefore there is that 8.4% reduction. And that concludes the expenses in operational expenses in general government. Within general government, we also have debt service. That's really a function of the principal and interest payments. We are looking at opportunities to do some refundings that could potentially bring that number down. And so hopefully by the time the Board of Finance approves this budget to move to the town council, we may have some updated numbers which could move that number down. And I believe that's all we have for general government, unless there are any other questions that you'd like, or just questions of the budget process in general. Neil told me to keep it under 30 minutes. I'm at 47. So
I think you have time.
I guess I would just add, this is my first year being on this side of the table, if you will. And what I've heard from so many others is that just the level of detail and the preparedness and everything, that Linda's done a great job filling both roles, whether he's budget director and our CFO. So a lot of thanks goes to Linda during tough times.
Yeah, I am sure this is, I mean, it's hard to encompass it all when you're looking at it or reading it. It's just, it's different. This is a lot of information when you're looking at it online
It just gets,
versus sitting there with it. Yeah.
it just gets better and better, really.
Yeah.
By the 10-year perspective I have.
That's
Really.
why he's winning awards.
That's right.
The poor guy's dealing with Wi-Fi that just keeps cutting out. So there's that.
You know what? Today's been good. What happened yesterday is because I'm home, so I was on the internet. My wife was on, and I have two kids, a high schooler and a middle schooler, and all of us were on. And I think we were just too much for Optimum.
Don't get me started on Optimum. You don't even want to start that. Horrible, horrible, horrible.
Great job, Linda.
Yeah, very good. All
Thank
given,
you.
very good.
Is that
All
a
right,
wrap
I'm
or is
tossing
there
it back.
more?
Neil is running, right? Tossing it back to Neil.
I thought you were the,
We
Are,
lost
are we summarizing here, Neil, or are we?
well, there's anything else that anyone has to say? I mean,
Yeah.
I think the data is great. It's easy to understand. It's one of the easier groups. It doesn't usually have that much change anyway. But here, the detail and all that we've said it is good. So great accolades to Linda. Anyone have any other questions?
I just am looking for the printed version.
Oh,
It's
Say
on
that again,
your,
Christina?
it's on your iPad.
Yeah, but I can't absorb that much information.
we can print you a copy here.
It's a lot of detail. That's what I said. You really have to, you have to.
Christina, we can get you a printed copy if you'd like us to print one for you.
Yes, please, thank you.
Okay.
Kevin and I are working on the transmittal, and so we'll have a new set of numbers with a transmittal document summarizing the major changes and the line item detail, and we can get you a printed copy of that. So those would be the latest numbers, including what the Board of Selectmen has approved.
Thank you.
Linda, is there a copy online that we can look at, or that you can send us to that is not on the iPad?
I believe Pam forwarded you what I just shared yesterday via email,
Yeah.
but I can send it again.
No, if she
That's
sent
not
it yesterday,
related on the greatest.
what I opened from her was simply the agenda. I must have.
No, the whole thing.
No, it's at the bottom.
Oh,
all
okay.
there.
Right, there were two items.
It's online also, isn't it now, Linda? On the website?
It wasn't when I just looked, Kevin.
Not yet.
No, it was an attachment at the bottom, and I'd
Yes.
asked to have that sent out if we could, because it was a really tight turnaround.
Yeah,
But it
no,
was
that-
on your, document. Linda, just one other thing, the excess cost grant, are there any variables here that we don't know of with all the changes at the state that could possibly affect us?
No, the governor's indicated will be the same. I think the only variable that impacts us is if at any point the Board of Ed goes above their costs, because we keep that on the town side and we net it out of, it's not part of the calculations of our funding for the Board of Ed. So in years when they go over, they will come back and ask us to allocate. I think we did that, I think it was last year where they came back and they said they were over about 200,000. So we couldn't book the full $1,900,000 that came to us. We had to net out and give them 200,000 and we kept the 7. That's the only variable that could possibly change in terms of that revenue hitting the general fund.
And any update on reimbursements from the COVID cost expenses and for the year plus, I mean, is it on schedule or is it just, is it too wild to second guess?
Well, on the state side, for the allocation that we've received, they're telling us we received everything from the state. So we don't anticipate receiving any more. The first batch was based on reimbursement of actual, and then the second batch was a per capita calculation that they did, which we got. We are, however, still waiting on FEMA reimbursements, and Bill Osman is working with them. We don't know yet. And I haven't yet heard back on the Board of Ed side what their reimbursements have been on the 1.5 and the 400,000 special appropriation that the town provided, on where they are with that. So we're still waiting to hear from that.
Will we know that in the next month or so, when the budget process, at least by the time it gets to the Board of Finance, or not?
We may know the FEMA portion on the town, but I'm not sure. I have to talk with Dr. Keating to see what she's hearing on the Board of Ed reimbursements.
Will the reimbursement be to the town, not to the Board of Ed, since we gave them the money?
Yeah.
The 1.9 will go back to the non-lapsing fund. So it will go back to the town and not to the Board of Ed, because those were funds that were spent in the non-lapsing. So yeah, in a sense, they will be coming back to the town.
That was 1.9 or 1.5?
It was 1.5 plus 0.4, so it's 1.9. Yes.
Well, the 1.5 was a special appropriation. The 400 was a non-lapsing fund. What was the non-lapsing fund was agreed to before the close of the fiscal year?
Right, but the 1.5 was also transferred into the non-lapsing. So all the expenses are accounted for in that fund, not in their general fund.
Okay, even though it wasn't a non-lapsing fund at that point, it was, but you put it in that account, okay.
So
Right.
just a second, the special appropriation goes back to who? The town?
Yes,
Or-
any reimbursement from both, any one of those, the 400 or the 1.5, will come back to the town.
Right.
We got to keep track of that to make sure they don't.
Oh, I absolutely. And, but we will know this with this last go around at the end of the year that was approved by the federal government. It doesn't have to come out of the new one that the Congress is working on now, right? It was the one done by the end of the year. So we should know.
We should. I need to follow up with Dr. Keating to see where she is with that.
All
Judy,
right.
the way that shook out was that, initially the first COVID expenses, they asked us to put through FEMA,
Right.
and FEMA was terrible, but they sort of finally finalized, even though we've gotten no money yet from FEMA, right? And the state said that they would reimburse the 25%, since FEMA was only going to pay 75% of claims, that they would possibly reimburse the 25% that FEMA didn't reimburse. The second tranche of COVID from the state was based upon population and not by actual expenses. So we spent a lot more money, but we're only getting reimbursed. I think it's $25 a head or something, whatever the number is per population.
But that was in the per capita calculation, right? The whole calculation, it wasn't the 75%.
Well, that's why
It was the 25%, as I understood it, that was the per capita, right? Or wrong?
No, the
Right.
Right.
initial expenses, the initial COVID expenses from March until June.
Yeah.
Were based upon you submitting your actual expenses. And they required us to go through FEMA for all of that. And FEMA excluded a lot of things as not being eligible for FEMA, but they weren't necessarily not eligible for CARES Act purposes. So that, and in any event, we were only going to get 75% of what FEMA regarded as eligible expenses. And we were hoping the state was going to give us the balance of the 25%, plus possibly anything that was they regarded as not eligible for FEMA, but are eligible under CARES Act. So I personally, I'm still kind of confused as to what we're getting, because but the money for this fiscal year from July 1 to December 1 was allocated based to CARES Act funds, were based upon not FEMA, but based upon per capita population. So we didn't get our actual expenses reimbursed. We got a number which was much less because they were only reimbursing based upon population.
And what did we get for that?
Do we know what the second allocation was through June 30th, Linda?
Yes, I have to look it up.
Like 200 grand, but we spent, and yet on the Board of Education side, I think they have other grants coming out for that are education oriented CARES Act funds. They got $90,000 before the end of the fiscal year. And then I think they got more education oriented CARES Act funds for the second part of the year. It's all very confusing.
Yeah.
Well, they intend it to be confusing, which is why you really have to ask these questions. It's not, it wasn't clear to me before. I'm still not totally clear, but
Not clear to me either, but you know.
so the 90,000 for the end of the fiscal year for CARES for BOE is not subject to what you just said for the current funding. That
Well,
was,
they broke it up into fiscal years, March through to June 30th, and they got $90,000, as I recall, which is CARES Act funds, but specifically dedicated for education. And then the first half of the fiscal year, the COVID expenses had to be incurred by December 31st. So the allocation on the town side was per capita. I don't know what the story is with respect to the Board of Education reimbursement but I think they got some more grants for CARES Act for the second half of the calendar year.
They did.
I'm
do you
hoping,
know that, or I need to send these questions in by tonight. Do I need to ask for explanation, or do we actually know that?
those wouldn't be
You could
back.
ask for a breakdown. I remember seeing, because the funds that they get from the states actually flow through the town. And so there was about, it was like 190 or 90, but they had to share that with the private schools. But those were grant funds separate from these operating funds. But there's a list. Let me see if I could dig it up and send that to you.
It
I
wouldn't be
believe
bad
Dr.
for
Keating
somebody to
said
ask the Board of Ed to schedule their COVID expenses and their reimbursements or their grants for COVID from the CARES Act.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna ask for the whole thing because I'm not clear. And when I look at the Board of Ed that was sent out, it's not answering my question. So I'll ask specifically. Yeah. Okay.
All right. I think we're done unless anyone has anything else.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
Linda. Thank you a lot. And everybody who came, sort of impromptu.
Tiger, are you ready for the snow?
Of course we are. We're always ready.
Good answer.
I have a question. Who prepared
They
the
are.
agenda for this? Was that you, Neil, or Judy?
Did I what?
Who prepared the agenda for this meeting?
Pam.
I thought it was Pam, but
All right,
no.
so I just took some quick notes, so we'll just have to write some minutes up. I'll get them done for her.
Okay,
All right.
good. Thank you.
So at 3 o'clock, it's a wrap.
3
But
o'clock.
should we taken attendance? Maybe
I
we
took-
should have, right?
I took
You
attendance.
took attendance? All
I
right,
did.
so,
So we'll say that Rich made a motion and Judy seconded to.
all right,
All in favor.
all right.
Good
Right.
one, everybody.